Thank you all for participating in this month's Sustainability Leadership Presentation Series, which is a partnership between Metropolitan Community College, Central Community College, the Joslin Institute for Sustainable Communities, and Waste Cap, Nebraska. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself. I am Sarah Murray and the Coordinator of Sustainable Practices at Metropolitan Community College. MCC and SLPS partners are very excited to have William Powers with us today. William is the Executive Director for the Nebraska Sustainable Agriculture Society. In addition, William currently serves as President of Slow Food Nebraska and is on the Board of Directors for the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center and the National Young Farmers Coalition, where he is a past president. He also serves on the Slow Food USA Policy Task Force. During William's presentation, please tweet using hashtag #SLPSThursday to ask any questions, which William will answer at the end of his presentation. Alternatively, you can use the chat box on your WebEx screen to ask questions. Again, that's hashtag #SLPSThursday or the chat box on your screen. At this point, I will go ahead and turn it over to William.
Well, hello, and thank you for inviting me here to speak about sustainable agriculture and foods in Nebraska. This is a timely conversation and one that I hope will inspire folks to think and appreciate the narrative of the where, why, and how their food is produced. Okay, sorry about that technical problem. Now I'd like to go over briefly what I'm going to cover today. First, I'm going to talk about sustainable agriculture as a whole, what it is, what it means, and what it encompasses, which includes economic viability, environmental awareness, and social responsibility, this idea of community. I'll provide some examples of sustainable agriculture that we've seen here in Nebraska and throughout the country. And then I'm going to talk about Darby Springs Farm, along with my wife and sons, Aiden and Liam. We have a small farm north of Lincoln. And then I'll talk about the Nebraska Sustainable Agricultural Society, which Sarah mentioned I'm the director of as well. I'll talk about what's happened in sustainable agriculture and local foods and what is happening and where it's headed. And then I'll do a local foods primer, just a basic run through of that, as that's a hot topic right now and a popular one. So with that, all right. Sustainable agriculture. What does that mean? While it might sound like a daunting and perhaps vague term, it really is an idea or set of ideas. What is agriculture? Webster defines agriculture as the art of farming or the work of cultivating the soil. That seems simple enough, but how does the culture factor into agriculture? Or does it? Growing food to feed oneself and or others should somehow be incorporated. One of my favorite authors is Wendell Berry, and he has a great quote that eating is an agricultural act. So as someone who eats, which we all do throughout the day, we're all involved in agriculture in some form. So shouldn't we care about the food, how it's raised, and how it's grown? Defining sustainable agriculture is really a philosophical discussion on what it means to eat, and our very existence depends upon it. While the USDA has created several panels to define sustainable agriculture, much as they did in the late 1990s to define organic agriculture, it remains undefinable. A rebel who cannot be boxed into a set of rules or regulations to be followed, that upon following them I am now sustainable. Sustainability is all about that journey, and in fact is predicated upon that journey. Certainly there are indicators that one can follow to guide them on that journey, but one does not do A plus B plus C and then they are now sustainable. Sustainability is a way of thinking or a lens through seeing the way things are and the way things should be. Not easy to obtain or to define, sustainability is the journey. So we look at sustainability as having a three-tiered approach. Certainly there are other components that can follow and fall under all three of these, but for us we look at sustainability as having economic viability, environmental stewardness, and socially responsible ideas. To be on the journey of sustainability, these three basic principles must be considered and acted upon. And I'll provide more information about each of these tiers and some examples of those. So first, economic viability. Perhaps it's the most common measure of sustainability, and while it's important, it is equally important to have the other two tiers working in concert with economic viability. Again, Webster defines economic viability as the ability to be financed or to sustain one's financial resources. And certainly for a company or a person, or in this case a farm, to be viable, it needs to earn its keep. It needs to be worth its time. It needs to be worth the investment of money, of time, of labor, etc., to be worth it. So is economic viability all about the money? Yes, money does help to get the project going and to sustain it, but it is not the only way to measure economic viability. Several other factors should be considered. Can the products you are creating and raising and growing on your farm and food business be marketed? Is it unique? Is it a niche market? Will somebody or anybody want to buy this regularly, consistently, and continue to do that? Why is what you are selling important? Are you selling goods or are you selling an idea? A great TED Talk makes the claim that people do not buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Certainly this can be true of farming. Some common indicators of economic viability. Can the family subsist off what they grow, raise, and earn from the farm? Again, not just in terms of dollars, but in quality of life, in food and sustenance. A farm that has no off-farm income and where the measure of happiness is derived from what they grow and raise and how they live is an indicator of a healthy, sustainable farm. This picture shows a picture of Common Good Farm, and in the bottom is Ruth and Everett of Common Good Farm near Raymond, and at the top is their website. They are a certified organic and certified biodynamic farm. Both of the parents work off the farm, or work on the farm, and the kids also play an active role on that farm. They sell their products at local grocery stores, such as Open Harvest in Lincoln. They have two different CSA options, which CSA is Community Supported Agriculture. They sell direct from the farm, and they also do some farmers markets throughout the season. This would be a good indicator of economic viability of a sustainable farm. Another indicator is the farm profitable? Again, like any business, it needs to be profitable to continue to be able to farm, to be able to exist. Any business needs to do that. It also has to have the ability for growth on the farm. That's another indicator. Can the children return to the farm or earn from the farm while they are on the farm? And if the farm cannot support, and if not, can the farm support jobs from the community that they farm and are a part of? So can community people come out, get a job? Is it creating jobs within the community? The second tier we look at is environmental stewardness. What impact does the farm have on the environment it is in? An equally important measure is how that impact on the environment, both the actual place but also the unseen environmental factors. While economic viability is a common measure of sustainability, environmental stewardness is often grouped into what people that are well environmentalists, and that is all they care about, is the environment. An interesting conundrum, environmental steward is much more than just a concern for the environment. It is the idea that one is not only aware of, but invested in the security and the serenity of the environment in which they're farming, living, and stewarding. What they do today somehow impacts what will happen in the future and if there is a possibility of a future. Different farming practices produce different results to the land and to the animals and to the people and to life. The decisions that are made last not only in this lifetime but in multiple lifetimes. Utilizing principles of ecosystem management that mimic the natural cycle of life can not only maintain ecosystems but also rehabilitate the land that has not had this nurture and care for it otherwise. So being cognizant of the environment and being a responsible steward of the land, etc., is as important as any principle of sustainability. So I have some examples of environmental stewardship. Holistic management, I have a book over here that we can look at later. Holistic management is a systems thinking approach to managing resources by looking at the whole picture. What I do with this 40 acres versus what I do with some fruit orchards, how the impact on one is to the other one is important. Organic agriculture, as I'll allude to later with the Nebraska Sustainable Agricultural Society, we were originally the Nebraska Organic Agricultural Association and became Sustainable Agriculture later. Organic agriculture is a standard defined by the United States Department of Agriculture, and you can read how it's an ecological production management system. So those are two common environmental stewardship principles that you often see in sustainable farms. So in this picture is longtime University of Nebraska Extension educator Terry Gomper. He was an outside-the-box thinker well before his time, especially for the university, and he was instrumental in bringing the concept of holistic management not just to Nebraska, but as an idea throughout the world. In this picture, he is discussing dung beetles and the importance of them in building topsoil and building organic manure and breaking down the manure. Some benefits of holistic management include a healthier environment as the idea of looking at the picture as a whole, the bigger picture, how each decision is made and how it impacts each part of the farm, and how the stronger family relationships as, again, the whole is considered with each family member playing a role in that decision framework. Here again is Common Good Farm near Raymond, Nebraska. I mentioned that they're a certified organic farm. They're utilizing certified organic practices for their fruits and vegetables that you see in the picture. And you can see the homestead in the background as well as the farmers and some of the children. Organic agriculture, again, involves the use of ecological and natural practices to farm in a way so as to mimic nature. The final tier we look at with sustainable agriculture is socially responsible. What impact does the farm have on the community? Does the farm sell, buy, work, etc. within that local community? And does that community recognize the importance of that farm in the community? In basic terms, it means being invested in your community and the community around wherever you are. And I don't mean in terms just of money again. It means actually caring about the welfare of your community. Be it rural, urban, rich, poor, it's a genuine interest in one's or multiple one's welfare. Building that relationship, which is so crucial for the sustainability of us as a society and as a people. And while not one tier of sustainability is more important than another, this tier might be the hardest to obtain, but on the surface, seems like it should be the most simple. Farmers markets are a great example of this in sustainable agriculture. Farmers selling their products in an open, public, typically more urban space, even if it's a town of 800 that has a farmer's market that's more urban than perhaps where they're growing. This is where the customer meets firsthand, and from the first tomato that's sold, they're invested in that customer's well-being, and likewise the farmer's invested in the customer. In the following weeks, the customer returns, seeks out that farmer, and buys not only more tomatoes, but also sees what else the farm has and purchases that, and the relationship is developed. It is actually building a relationship to lay the foundation for a community of people that involves, at the very basic level, people from all walks of life and around the most common of necessities, food. So some common examples, again, we mentioned the farmers markets, those relationships that are built, grocery stores. You can see where grocery stores in Lincoln and Omaha and throughout the state are sourcing local, whether they say buy fresh, buy local, or Nebraska grown, grow Nebraska, etc. And then community events. Does the farm participate in community building events? For our example, I use Soresco Days, where our farms participated, whether it's in the parade or having an ice cream stand, things like that. So again, we're back to Common Good Farm as a good example of this. You see Everett from Common Good Farm. I'm not sure which farmer's market he's at, but he's selling some of their fruits and veggies. The picture is meant to showcase the relationships that are built through the connecting power that is the farmers market. Customers and farmers establish this relationship and extends not only from the farmers markets to directly from the farm, but into a long-lasting friendship that across multiple facets of life is building a community. This picture shows another community building event, our Nebraska Young Farmer Nights. This was taken in Omaha. This was at Big Muddy Urban Farm, so this is about 36 and California, for those familiar with the Omaha area. In the bottom picture is my farmer in training, Aiden, my son, feeding the chickens. And this is a very urban part of Omaha. A lot of minority individuals in this area and lower income individuals. But we opened this Young Farmer Night up, again, with this idea of building community. We had a potluck, and then we did a pasture walk, if you will, in Omaha. And so we got to see this urban backyard chicken farm, if you will, and they also do fruits and veggies. So this is just another example of that building community. Big Muddy Urban Farm. What's that? Actually, I don't know how to point. Right here is Allie Clark, and she was one of them, and she is an urban ag intern for the Sustainable Ag Society, works for Omaha City Sprouts as well. And then this guy right here is actually the chicken farmer, and his name is Brandon Speary, and his wife is somewhere around, but maybe over there. I don't know. Anyway, so those would be the folks that were instrumental in starting Big Muddy Urban Farm. It's a collective farm, if you will. These two aren't related. They're not partners. It was just one person liked to do fruits and veggies. Somebody else liked to do chickens, as you can see, and why not get together and have a collective farm? And so that's a good example of that. So the final picture that I have of this idea of socially responsible within sustainable agriculture. So this is a farm dinner at a certified organic grass-fed dairy farm near Raymond. There's not a bathroom within 100 yards. There's not a kitchen within 200. They really set up, and it's 4-course meal, all locally sourced. This would have been the middle of the growing season, probably. I think it was August. And it's that connection between the chef, the consumer, and the farmer out in the field. I have no doubt that the servers that you see there probably had to sidestep some cow patties to get out there, but that's kind of that connection of all of those. So again, it's meant to lay the foundation of a community, invested in the farm, be it financially, emotionally, or physically. And they come over, it's a meal, and they plant the seeds for that community. This was also, I should disclose, this was a fundraiser dinner. I'm not sure what the organization was for this fundraiser dinner. So next, I want to talk about Darby Springs Farm a little bit. I'm going to give a little bit of background about myself and Darby Springs Farm and what we're doing and some of the exciting projects we have going on. So I grew up on a dairy farm near Plain City, Ohio. That's about 30 miles northwest of Columbus, Ohio, for those that are familiar with Ohio. My family's farm was called Powers Ark. Creative, I know, but we had all sorts of animals. In my view, our main animals were the Guernsey cows. As many people who know me, I still have a huge fondness for Guernsey cows, and we'll see that later. I still remember coming home from church one day when I was probably 3 or 4 years old. We had an old brown and white cow tied up to the fence. I didn't know this was happening, but her name was Charm. My uncle, who ran my family's dairy farm, had dropped her off earlier in the day for us to use as our family's milk cow. That was the inception of my love for the Guernsey cow. My family's farm was very diverse growing up and pretty small by any measure. We had roughly 20 acres, mostly pasture land in the Big Darby Creek Basin in Ohio. Our farm name is Darby Springs. The Darby comes from the Big Darby Creek, which I grew up on. The springs actually comes from, we have at least 4 Clearwater springs that we've found running through our property, which in this age of water issues is definitely an advantage for our farm, which I'll get to later. Part of our farm's namesake today was a result of growing, which I mentioned. At any time, our farm had 20 to 30 ewes, mama lambs, and their lambs. We had chickens, turkeys, geese, ducks, probably a couple hundred or so to count, just running free. They always came back to eat, of course. That was a way to rein them in. We had 5 to 10 pigs that we were feeding out, several horses, which didn't really do anything. They were just there because they looked good, I guess. We had several Guernsey cows, of course. We also had gardens, fruit orchards, fruit trees, things like that. Huge garden, and we would can, and that was what we lived off of for the year, like many farms you see in Nebraska and throughout the country. We also kept the dry cows and the bred heifers from my uncle's, the family's farm, the greater farm, so to speak, which is located in northeast Ohio still to this day. But my parents both worked off-farm jobs, so our farm was just an opportunity for me and my siblings to stay out of trouble, I guess, if you will. Living in the country, obviously, that was a great way for us to grow up. And so we also had a small field of alfalfa hay, which for anybody that's grown up on a farm, baling hay is another great way to stay out of trouble, mostly because by the end of it, you're too tired to do anything. The farm, as I mentioned, I had numerous siblings, 5 total. And so for me, it was an opportunity to set myself apart from my siblings, to do the farming. None of my siblings had an interest in the farm. They wanted to be inside watching cartoons or doing whatever else a kid could do at that time, pre-internet, Facebook, things like that. We didn't have cable, 2 television channels you had to change by hand, things like that. And so I was always outside. Doing the chores, interacting with nature, being a part of the culture of the land always appealed to me. And as I grew up, I knew that I was going to be not just in agriculture, but a farmer. That was instilled by visiting my grandfather, my mother's father, numerous times, seeing how he interacted with the land he was stewarding and how he treated his animals. And I learned that it's really it's a part of who you are. It's a part of that culture and agriculture that I mentioned earlier. I mentioned that this was my mother's father. Another thing that was unique for me growing up, my mother was the farmer, not my father. My father grew up in Silver Creek, Nebraska. My mother was born in Centerville, Iowa, but she was the one that had the farming background. She would have gotten into farming. She would have been a farmer and a vet, but she was told that that's not what a woman does. And so and that obviously is an incorrect statement. She would have been a great farmer and a great vet, but that's a sign of the times then versus now. So lessons learned and applied and how that desire becomes something like a moral obligation to ensure it lives on was another idea that my grandfather instilled in me. And at the time, I didn't realize that he was doing all this. I mean, he wasn't intentionally doing it. He was just being himself, but learning the lessons from him as we did chores. I think he would really get a kick out of what we're doing now on our farm. So anyway, I went to the University of Nebraska with the extent of getting a degree in agricultural business, going back to the farm. I realized very early on that wasn't going to happen. First ag business degree at the university, it doesn't teach you to be a farmer, unfortunately. Good classes, useful information, yes, but not to be a farmer. The other thing was I wanted to inherit that larger farm that I mentioned. So my mom has 6 siblings. Each of them have 3 or 4 kids. I mean, you can get to the chain. It was never going to happen. I was very low on the totem pole, and so that's fine. I met my wife, Crystal, very early on, and really never looked back. I mean, we knew pretty early on that we were meant to be together, if you will. But she had grown up on a diverse family farm in south central Nebraska, and she had a similar background. Her degree was in, she's an extension educator at the university now, so her degree was like biological systems engineering or something very technical like that, very scientific, which isn't me at all, which, full disclosure, I acknowledged early on she was always going to make more money than me, and I was totally fine with that. As far as occupation, she's the science person, I'm the communication, philosophical, well, maybe we should do it this way sort of person. So she had grown up on a diverse farm in south central Nebraska, which the family still farms there today. We both graduated. I graduated with a degree in Ag Communications and Leadership, which isn't a full program at the university, but my counselor kind of threw it together based on my interest and what I wanted to do. We went to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York for grad school, and it was there that this idea of returning and actually farming and seeing that we could actually do it really took hold. Not that Nebraska didn't prepare us for that, but what we learned, the people we met, and the small farmers that we met at Cornell University really inspired us to want to, first of all, come back to Nebraska. Nothing against the people, but we really loved Nebraska. But some of the ideas we felt we were really in tune with. So after grad school, we returned to Nebraska, and we began further laying the foundation, not really having a timeline, just kind of, and not really winging it either, just we had this idea, we had these things to pay off, student debt, and we knew those were eventually going to merge. We spent numerous hours at coffee shops and craft breweries laying the foundation for our farm. And then we joined, I put this in this morning because I hadn't really appreciated the journey, but we joined the Nebraska Sustainable Agriculture Society in 2008. They put on a Healthy Farms Conference, which I'll get to later, but that conference that year was here at Metro in this facility with the Institute for the Culinary Arts, which is now another building over, which some of you can attest to. But there were sessions in this room, there were sessions in the kitchen, but that really, even though we were talking mostly about food, cutting up a chicken or marketing, things like that, really helped further strengthen that foundation of sustainable agriculture. In 2009, I became the director of the Sustainable Agricultural Society, and if you go back to 2008, I had no idea that a year later that would happen, so that was really, again, timely and interesting how that worked. But NSAS further reinforced what we wanted to do and what we hoped to do and how to get there. We met realtors from Seward, Nebraska, who listened to our crazy ideas, because at the time we thought they were crazy, just like, why would anybody listen to us? But listened to our ideas on this small farm. We didn't know that we were going to, which we'll get to later again, do an on-farm ice cream store, things like that. We knew we were going to have Guernsey dairy cows, obviously, and we knew that we were probably going to have chickens, which was my wife's big background. So anything else, we were just winging it, which, sometimes that's what farming is. We eventually found our place on earth near Sarasco. Our farm began with 2 horses and 2 feeder calves. With the feeder calves, we were hoping to feed them out as beef cows. But I mentioned that unique thing that what people want, what people will buy, why does it matter, what's unique about it. So we got the feeder calves. We were bottle feeding them, which anybody that's ever done that, we just really did not like to do that. So we either needed to buy a mama cow or butcher them. And so we butchered the feeder calves at about 300 pounds. And it technically, according to Wikipedia, falls under this rose veal, pasture-raised, humanely raised, milk-fed veal. And when we did that, we put a Facebook post out, and we had customers lining up to be on a list for this humanely raised, pasture-raised veal product. And so that's kind of stumbling upon something that we could do down the road. And that's really, farming is kind of like that. Sometimes you stumble upon things that work and don't. And so anyway, we soon purchased about 50 layer hens, and you'll see some of them later on. We still have 2 left. They're pets now because they're 5 years old. Still lay eggs, but whenever we do farm tours, Penny Henny is her name, and you'll see her later, goes out and does the farm tours with us. And then after the second year, we purchased our first Guernsey cow, because anybody, again, that knows me knows I'm going to get back to the Guernsey cow. We've had ups and downs. Some years were better than most. We actually 3 years after we purchased that first Guernsey cow, which we looked at as the matriarch of our farm. We lost her. She got sick and rapidly declined and died, but that's the nature of farming. Sometimes it's hard and you deal with that, keep moving on. But in 2015, this year, we're about to complete our 6th year. We still have the horses, still trying to find a place for them and what they're actually going to contribute to the farm. We still have our herd of Guernseys, which has grown from that one, even though we lost her, that we have 5. And most importantly, we're having fun with the farm. So the farm's located east of Ceresco. I was talking with somebody earlier. For those that don't know Ceresco, it's a Swedish farming community named after Ceresco, Michigan. It dates back to about when the state was founded in the 1800s. The root of the word is Circes, which is the goddess of the harvest. And so we're really about that idea of place and appreciating that. We don't have Swedish backgrounds, but this is where we're at. This is the farming community we're a part of. And so appreciating that, being a part of Ceresco Days and all of that. Remnants of the tallgrass prairie, we'll see pictures later, but it's on the very northern tip of the tallgrass prairie in the saline wetlands that extends from just beyond our farm, clear south to Lincoln. And it's really a part of the reason the city of Lincoln was founded. Was a big reason was these saline wetlands and the salt quarries. Hundreds of years ago, this would have been a migration path for bison, elk, mink, cranes, etc. We still have some cranes, and we have quite a few mink that still roam about in the saline wetlands. So it's never been farmed actively, never controlled grazing, no row crops. It is in a conservation easement, so you wouldn't be able to do row crops anyway. But so it's really untouched prairie. So on the one hand, that's great, but then on the other hand, there needs to be that livestock, whether it's the bison, elk in a migration path or our pasture-based system to help with invasive species that have taken over. And it's ideally suited for a pasture-based farm, which is what we want to do anyway. And so I'm bringing up all of these to kind of show the journey that is sustainability and how we get about to that. We never set out looking for this, but yet we did. We wanted this serene place on earth. That's another great Wendell Berry book, is A Place on Earth. And he alludes to this, it's not a physical place necessarily, but this idea of what it can be and what it perhaps should be. And so it's very, sounds like we're romanticizing it. It's been a lot of hard work, but it's also, as I mentioned, fun. If you're not having fun, find something that makes you have fun. So now we're going to go to, I'm going to explain this and then we'll watch it. So one of the things I mentioned earlier is an ice cream store, dairy barn, parlor idea. This is completed, but we put together a video using the Barn Raiser, which it's a crowdfunding site for sustainable and entrepreneurial ideas. And so our idea you'll hear about. We're involving the community at all phases, from helping to invest in it and be an investor and a player to actually helping to physically raise a barn. A majority of our investors were within Nebraska and surrounding counties, but they weren't necessarily people we know. I would say 25% were people we knew, but they were just people that are interested in being a part of this, of great ice cream, of bringing their kids out to the farm to milk cows, things like that. So we'll watch the video and you can see what we're talking about.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and push the video through to you. You guys can control the size and volume on your own. The video should automatically start, but if it doesn't, please go ahead and push start. And please know there may be a brief delay following the video while we wait for other locations to catch up.
Okay, so that was our little video for that. I mentioned Penny Henny. I was carrying her in that picture. She's my cat, I guess, if you will, or my dog. But she still lays eggs, so she'll earn her keep. So That is our barn raiser. That was my wife, and then Liam was the younger one, and then Aiden's the older boy. They do chores actively with me in the mornings when it's nice out, feed the chickens, water the cows, things like that. And so really trying to embody a family farm idea. So so this is our farm. This is the sun rising. I guess I have to stay here. So this would be looking out northeast of the farm. One of the things that we found that's very unique about our farm, again, I mentioned those springs. When there's fog or a mist, you can't see it in the picture. You can see it live or in a video, but the fog and the mist dances over the springs, whether it's hot or cold. It's really unique. We call it, my wife is not a morning person, so she's never experienced this, but the stillness before the chaos, and you slowly hear the farm wake up, whether it's the roosters crowing or the birds that are just starting to chirp, or the pheasants. We have tons of pheasants, and you can hear as you walk closer to this first bunch of cattails there, and there's pheasant in there. They click almost like a turkey call or something, not a turkey call, like a hunter has to mimic, but they click, and the closer you get, the faster they click, and then they fly away. So, but it's really unique. This is another great picture of that. That looks like there's hills. This is looking straight east. This is one of our horses, so this would be one good use for our horses. Obviously, it's a great picture. It's not photoshopped or anything. But that's the background is kind of that fog dancing over one of the springs. I'm not a great photographer, but when you're working with this, anybody could be. So I mentioned the Nebraska Sustainable Agricultural Society. Prior to joining the nonprofit, I knew very little about what sustainable agriculture was. And after attending that first conference here, I had learned quite a bit. I also soon realized that it wasn't that dissimilar to my own farming background and the ideas that my grandfather had farmed with. Rotational grazing, cover crops, no-till, my grandfather was doing clear back pre-World War II, and they're all commonly accepted practices in sustainable farming systems. And they were all things I could relate to. It wasn't just growing vegetables on a quarter of acre of land and selling them to a grocery store, but it was actually my background in animals and pasture and things like that. The conference and other events really helped to provide the framework for my own farm and the narratives for my views on agriculture, and so I feel very fortunate to have experienced that. So NSAS, Nebraska Sustainable Ag Society, can trace its roots back to the 1950s and the 1960s. As farmers across the state were seeing firsthand the impacts of different farming practices, not only on their farms and in their animals, but also on their families. Folks began meeting at town halls, VFWs, churches across the state. They were never anything formal, and they always involved food. A good potluck meal makes for a great meeting. They drive for hours just to connect with other farmers, experience similar issues, ups and downs, trials and tribulations. And these informal gatherings eventually morphed into formally organizing as the Nebraska Organic Agricultural Association in 1976. If I was around at the time, I would go after NOAA's website, the weather NOAA, but I was not. But I do know that was perhaps a reason that they switched their acronym. Not the only reason, but in 1977, the very first Healthy Farms Conference was held, and it laid the framework for the organization as an education and outreach tool in promoting sustainable agriculture and foods. In 1986, they changed their name to the Nebraska Sustainable Agricultural Society, recognizing that the holistic view that incorporates all of the diversity that is agriculture instead of a singular focus just on organic agriculture. Our founders included Dave Vetter from Grain Place Foods in Marquette, Nebraska. He's still farming out there with his family. His family's been farming organically since 1953. They were pioneers not just in Nebraska, but throughout the country and even really the world. They've long been supporters of sustainable and organic agriculture and foods. And Grain Place brought the rural component of agriculture and foods to the conversation. Dr. Warren Sauce from the University of Nebraska was another one of our founders. He was an early innovator and outside-of-the-box thinker, similar to Terry Gompert, which we mentioned. And he was instrumental in providing the latest research on agriculture for the organization and putting it into terms that we could understand and appreciate. And then our third founder was Bob Steffen from Boys Town. He ran the gardens at Boys Town organically since before World War II. And even though it wasn't called organic, that's the way he farmed them. So since then, our formal gathering in 1976, we've been a minimally staffed, low-budget, farmer-led nonprofit helping to lay the foundation for many of the local foods and farms initiatives in Nebraska and the Midwest. The Healthy Farms Conference, it's held every February. Next year we'll celebrate 40 years. It remains a vibrant tool for farmers and foodies and everybody in between to gather and continue to build this community of people and interested and concerned with how their food is produced. Our very first keynote was Fred Kirschman, who is a sustainable agricultural pioneer. You can research him, YouTube him. He's a great speaker and orator. And a longtime advocate and farmer, actually, in North Dakota. Through the years, we've had several keynotes, including Congressman Fortenberry, Joel Salatin, Wes Jackson, Nebraska's own Michael Forsberg, John Eichert, and many more that provided keynotes and workshops. And I would encourage you to YouTube or Google any of those individuals' great resources to have and that were available for farmers. NSAS has also created several projects through grants that have become their own successful organizations. Some right here in Omaha. Omaha City Sprouts started in the mid-1990s, and they work with Omahans to do local food systems, community gardens. I know they did a session on backyard chickens, so it's not just gardening. Other projects, the Nebraska Food Cooperative. So these two middle ones are their own organizations now, the Omaha City Sprouts and Nebraska Food Cooperative, doing great things. So the Nebraska Food Cooperative is an online year-round farmers market. I tell people the first time that my wife and I bought from the food cooperative, it was like when we got our food, it was like Christmas morning. It was just so neat because you got local foods from different farmers from across the state, all using sustainable organic principles, and it was really neat. I mean, you still got to pay for it, but it was still pretty cool. And they go year-round. I think they're going every other week on order cycles, and you can pick up, one of the pickup sites in Omaha is Jan's in Vincent, so definitely check them out. Farm Beginnings Nebraska, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a beginning farmer training program. The thing that separates it, it's unique in that it's farmer-led, and it's focused on sustainable agriculture. A lot of beginning farmer training programs, first of all, aren't farmer-led, and many also don't have that sustainable agriculture component. We've graduated over 100 aspiring farmers since 2006, and over 75% are now farming in Nebraska utilizing sustainable principles and selling to the local markets. Okay, so this is a little blurb about the Farm Beginnings. It is a collaborative project, so you can see, so these are sister organizations throughout the Midwest. So we conduct the Nebraska, of course the Farm Beginnings Nebraska, but there's South Dakota, Illinois, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. So it is part of the collaborative, which alludes to that social responsibility, building that community component, not just within what we're doing here, but in other like-minded organizations. So in 2006, we created the Buy First Buy Local Nebraska program. Buy First Buy Local is part of a national program. We help to bring a Nebraska chapter. It's run by Food Roots, which is housed in Pennsylvania. They produce a guide each spring with a listing of chefs, farms, grocery stores, institutions, including Metro, the Institute for the Culinary Arts is a member, restaurants and supporters, and it's essentially like a magazine that you can take around. It's free. And then when you're traveling throughout the state, you can find, well, hey, there's Back Alley Bakery in Hastings, or there's something in North Platte, things like that. Community Crops is located in Lincoln. It is very similar to Omaha City Sprouts in that they work with lower income, minority populations, community gardening initiatives, things like that. The Nebraska Young Farmer Nights, it's still a program of NSAS, and we're changing the name this year to Farmers Night Out, to be more inclusive of all types and ages of farmers. We did, with our press release, we've done it for 3 years. Some of our seasoned veterans felt they couldn't attend because it was for young farmers, but we tried to encourage young at heart, so we just changed the name. So hopefully we get a multitude of people, young and old, to attend. They're a lot of fun. We do urban, rural. We've done them at restaurants. We did one at the Gray Plume. We did one at Upstream in the Old Town, where we had the Nebraska Hop Growers Association come in and do a presentation on how Upstream sources hops from the Hop Growers Association. So it's really that connection of different components of the food system. Local Foods Hub, there's several of those. I know there's a group working on the one in Pershing in Lincoln, and trying to figure out how that can work and what that looks like. And then other food hubs, I know there's a group working in central Nebraska to try to get a food hub going out there where farmers and consumers, it can be an aggregated place for the marketplace, so to speak. So finally, I want to talk just a little bit about Slow Food Nebraska. Slow Food Nebraska began in 2006. Our current NSAS board president is Krista Dittman of Branched Oak Farm. Coincidentally, she was also the president in 2006, and her, along with Maggie Plesak of Maggie's Restaurant in the Haymarket in Lincoln, brought in a chapter of Slow Food. Slow Food USA is, as you can read, part of the Slow Food Network. It's all about good, clean, and fair food for all. The events are really this intersection of the farmer, the chef, and the eater, and everyone in between, and the events are all geared around food. Gatherings always include great food made from scratch, conversations about the different narratives of the cycle of the food. With talks of food traditions and heritage, Slow Food expands upon that by emphasizing the good, healthy, local food should not be restricted to only those that can access it and afford it, but to all. So Slow Food Nebraska, we're a volunteer organization. We put on 3 or 4 events a year. Our next event will be a beer and artisanal beer and cheese tasting out at Branched Oak Farm. If anybody's interested, my contact information will be at the end. So this is one of those beer and cheese events. So we had Lucky Bucket Brewing from La Vista. This is actually in the milking parlor of that dairy farm. So it's bringing in that agritourism component. And that's actually one of the interns for that farm. Again, this is actually another beer and cheese event at the same farm with Matt Stinchfield, who runs Plowshare Brewing in Lincoln now. If you guys haven't visited it, he's all about sustainable agriculture and local foods, and really embodies the spirit of that. And it's cheese in the dish there. The interesting thing, of course that's me, the interesting thing also in that picture is the other gentleman, I don't know his name, but he only speaks German, and Matt and I could not figure out what he was talking about. No doubt, as a German, probably something with the beer. So this is our 100-mile potluck. It's exactly what it sounds like, a 100-mile potluck. We encourage people to source the ingredients from only a 100-mile radius. For the most part, you could say that's true. This would have been in August, so there could have been cantaloupe ready. There's beets up there in the top. So I would wager a majority. We don't want it to be too daunting. Salt obviously isn't going to happen. Pepper, coffee, things like that's not going to happen. But for the most part, we try to encourage them to source locally. It's a free event. It's a potluck. And then we did a tour of the gardens that the gentleman who hosted ran. So, and as you can see, we're close to dinner time, but that will make anybody hungry. So, this is another pairing, craft beer and then the cheese with Nebraska-grown honey. And so we have a couple hard cheeses and a couple soft cheeses. And I think the honey was actually also from their farm as well. So here's Matt again. You can see the parlor off into the top. That was where the very first picture was. The farmer that owns this, his previous occupation, if you will. He was a mason, a bricklayer, and so he did that all by hand, which is very unique to me. And so that definitely helps build the ag component. And you can't really make her out, but if you see the top of Matt's head and in the back, there's a lady. That's Krista Dittman, the NSF board president, hiding. And that's also her farm, by the way. So here's one of our other events, which is a soup supper. This is in the middle of winter. Soup's great in the middle of winter. So while actually still even a lot of the foods are local, it's more of your root vegetables, stocks, soup bones, meats, things that you could get in the middle of winter. The key component with all these pictures is this idea of a community and a melting pot for great conversation around food. You have farmers in that picture. The lady, that's Krista Dittman, the lady right there, but sitting next to her, that's a pastor at a church. You can see Ruth and Everett clear in the back, the farmers that we highlighted. There's myself and my wife. This gentleman clear against the wall here is a baker in Lincoln. So it's really this melting pot for people from all parts of society. This is one of our Nebraska Young Farmer Nights from last year. This, we actually had about 50 people there, and so you can't see all the other people, but it's a pretty good mix of, most of these people do look young, I would agree with that, but it's a good mix of urban and rural, and farmer and non-farmer. About half the group that you can see there are not farmers, and they will never be farmers, but they are concerned about where their food comes from. And so they're talking in the picture about, again, you can't really see the picture, but they grew peanuts in that plot of land she's pointing to, which I always thought you couldn't do in Nebraska. And there's not even, you can see the greenhouse. It's not even in the greenhouse, but they grew peanuts there, and it worked. And it also helped to replenish the topsoil, so it might make a good cover crop down the road. Again, the beer and cheese, this actually is a younger individual, so all of our events are family friendly. This was not any event we put on. We helped to coordinate a group to come out and put on an event at this dairy farm, kind of bring in, again, that agri-ecotourism component. But you can see the vista at this farm, which, again, quality of life, happiness, that's another great component of this. So at NSF, we have two major events. The first one I mentioned, the Healthy Farms Conference. Our second one is the Celebrating the Fabric of the Local Foods Community. We call it our Producer's Choice Chef Award. It's held each January, and it's held here at Metro at the Institute for the Culinary Arts. It highlights chefs from across Nebraska that the farmers and foodies in the organization have nominated for their dedication to healthy, sustainable local food systems. And it really is a melting pot for folks that grow the food and raise the food to those that source and prepare the food. And it's modeled after the Iron Chef competitions you see on the Food Network, but much more friendly and a lot more fun, and I would argue a lot better food. So we had last year, or in 2014, we had 5 chefs nominated, including a couple graduates of the Institute for the Culinary Arts. This year we had 6. 4 were from Omaha, 1 was from Lincoln, and 1 was from Hastings. So it's, yes, we do get a lot of chefs nominated from Omaha, but we also get Lincoln and further out state Nebraska. So, and no, I'll show you some pictures of it. It's a pretty fun time. So this is all this year. So last year we didn't have any female chefs, and there are female chefs doing great things. So we had Iva, and she's from Modern Love, the gal Claire on the far side. The other gal is Jessica Dugan and Colin Dugan from Kitchen Table here in Omaha. The middle guy, Tim Mades from Aviola Osteria in Dundee. Glenn Wheeler from Spencer's, also in Omaha. Those are the Omaha chefs. And then on the edges, you have John Hamburger from Back Alley Bakery, clear here on the left, and Kevin Shin from Bread and Cup in Lincoln. But they're all recognized for their contributions, not just in what they source and they prepare, but how they promote local foods throughout the community. And while we did do an Iron Chef competition and somebody has to win, it was a friendly competition, but Colin and Jessica from Kitchen Table were our winners, and it was very close. So I think Tim is a student graduate of the Institute for the Culinary Arts. So they had one of the other things that's unique about that, they have farmers sponsor their tables. And essentially, so the farmers sit at a table of 8, one or two of the farmers, and they're sitting with the rest of the general public, telling about their farm, really bridging that gap between field or pasture to plate. And so my wife and I hosted a table. Here you can kind of see the melting pot. This was a chef winner from last year. This is Joe Maurer from Lot 2 in Benson with his wife. But we invited the chefs that were nominated last year to come back. And so I think this was one of the winning entrees from Kitchen Table. And it was a really good dish. I'm not sure what kind of bread that was. I don't even have the details on what the first part is, but it was very good. Everybody was full by the end of the evening. So finally, I want to talk a little bit about local food, since there seems to be that seems to be a hot topic, and as it should be. Not everybody is aware of what local foods means. The serious story, I was at an event and somebody said, does their local McDonald's count? And no, obviously that does not count. I couldn't tell if they were being a smart aleck or serious, but no. There are many varying definitions of local food. I've never seen one with the McDonald's in it. I believe the biggest factor for knowing where your food comes from, or for local food, is knowing where your food comes from and understanding that process. Establishing a relationship with the farmer that grows the food, appreciating the time, energy, and emotion that went into the foods that you eat. While there isn't a set definition, there are some parameters that have been commonly used. Food within 100 miles is one that's often put out there. Food only from Nebraska is another one. I think it all depends. I mentioned the 100-mile potluck. I love coffee. It can't be grown here, not even in a greenhouse. It can, however, be roasted here, and it can be sourced from a fair trade, shade-grown farmer. So that's one example of, still incorporating that localness of the food product. So why local foods? There are numerous benefits, and not just to your health. Supporting the community that you live, work, and play in is as important. Everyone's heard the stats about how a dollar spent locally, more and more stays locally of that dollar. But it's also this idea of deriving happiness from supporting and being invested in the community and in what you are doing in that community. And it's really experiencing the culture that is a part of that community. So here are some places to get local foods. We mentioned some of these earlier, the food co-op, farmers markets. You can follow that link. It's a Google map. It hasn't been updated in a year, but most farmers markets will be opening up soon. On-farm stores, many of the local farmers have on-farm stores, maybe not set hours, but where you call ahead and you can get stuff. Grocery stores, I mentioned Jan's in Benson. Some of the Hy-Vees and Russ's are also starting to carry local items. You have to look carefully for them, but you can find them. Open Harvest in Lincoln is a great location as well, and I definitely, if you're in Lincoln, check out Open Harvest. In my experience, I think they probably have the most local items outside of an actual farmer's market. So finally, I would like to talk about how you can be involved. And what I hope you take away from this is that everyone can be involved at any level in the food cycle. So don't just visit the farmers markets, but stop and talk with the farmers at these markets. Ask questions, ask where they farm, why they farm, how they farm. I mentioned the TED Talk earlier, but it's been an important part in what my wife and I are trying to do about how people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And albeit hard work, most farmers in sustainable farming do it because they love to do it and they're having fun. Many farmers markets will be opening up across the state, and if you haven't been there in a while, make it a goal to find one close by and become a regular and build that relationship. Stop by these grocery stores that we've mentioned. And if you can't visit either of the places, Jan's or Open Harvest, go to the Hy-Vee or the Russ's or whatever grocery store you go to and ask them about sourcing locally. Many are probably open to it and just weren't aware that they could do it. It's similar to, we went to a restaurant and asked if they had cheese from Branched Oak Farm, and they didn't. And so we gave them some information, and hopefully they sourced from Branched Oak Farm now. It's really that simple, and most of them are really open to that. So I put get in your kitchen. I love cooking. I probably do most of the cooking at our house because I love it. But I believe a home-cooked meal is still the staple in many households and should be. And it allows the family to slow down and appreciate the meal. So after you visited the market, definitely get in the kitchen. So restaurants are getting on board with local foods and sustainable agriculture. Across the state, there are several great options. Back Alley Bakery in Hastings is a prime example that you don't have to be in the big city to get this awesome food. It is a bakery, but they do like today's pizza night, phenomenal pizzas. But they have a regular old restaurant. You can get great locally roasted coffee, breads, cinnamon rolls, all sorts of goodies. Lincoln has several great options in Bread Cup and Maggie's, which we've mentioned. Omaha has really exploded with local foods in the past years. And it seems like there's a new restaurant opening every month with an emphasis on local sustainable foods. There's many of them, but my favorites are Kitchen Table and Gray Plume. Do a Google Map search of local foods in Nebraska, and many of these will show up. In Omaha, there's starting to be quite a few. Play in the dirt. I used to worry that my son ate too much dirt. I don't really have a problem with it because, I mean, it's our dirt. There's no chemicals or anything on it. I don't want them eating it, of course, but playing in the dirt's good for the kids. Go visit one of the farms using the sustainable practices. Many are eager to showcase why and how they farm. And they also have farm events that are open to the family, and they allow for a greater understanding of that relationship. And, you know, I'm sure they would love for you to come out and pull weeds or something. So finally, I'm always making a plug for more farmers. We need a lot more farmers and a lot more farms. It's one of the greatest issues facing agriculture. So grow something, anything, whether it's herbs on your balcony or tomatoes. You'll experience the difference right away. Take a leap and get a little land and have some Guernsey cows, of course. You'll notice the difference right away. I've talked about the relationships that are built and crucial to agriculture and food, but perhaps none are as great as the relationship to growing your own food or nurturing the food from dirt to plate. So become a part of the narrative and focus the lens on which you see food through to an even greater understanding. Thank you. Any questions?
We have a question on Twitter, if you would mind repeating the question.
Let me find that thing. Okay.
Okay. What are some of the biggest hurdles for sustainable farming?
I think, so the question is, what are some of the greatest hurdles, the biggest hurdles for sustainable farmers? Like agriculture as a whole, weather, Mother Nature, you know, that's an issue. While we're not dealing with a drought in California, it was only a couple of years ago that was a big issue. That's not really something you can change or fix. Certainly there's farming practices that can help you handle a drought or a flood, the other extreme. And so I think that's one of the biggest issues facing agriculture as a whole, but definitely sustainable agriculture. And so utilizing cover crops in the wintertime when there's not anything growing, cover crops can provide cover for the soil so there's not erosion. Things like that as far as the weather. Financing, I think, remains a major hurdle for farmers, sustainable farmers. If you weren't born into millions of dollars and if you don't have access to land, so you're not inheriting it, that becomes a major challenge. My wife and I were fortunate on the one hand and unfortunate on the other hand. I never got to that story, but it was quite a struggle to get financing for our farm because we didn't inherit it. We're not rich by any measure. And so finding the loan program through the government that would work was a struggle, and it's actually not even an agricultural program because it's technically not considered. At the time, it wasn't considered farming. You want to have a pasture-based system. What does that mean? I mean, the loan officers didn't understand that because they couldn't put it into a sheet or a standard spreadsheet, and so you're going to make this much money after you lose this much money trying to get it in the first place. It was quite the challenge. So finding ways that we can support young and beginning farmers and farmers, I think remains a challenge. I think those are the biggest things, the weather, and then actually getting the access to be able to farm, whether it's a quarter of an acre in Omaha or Lincoln or a larger, 40, 50 acre or more farm.
We have another one here, and kind of actually based off of what you were just saying. Are there any policies that are impacting sustainable farming in a positive or negative way? Or could you maybe explain a little bit more about the issues you encountered?
So the question is policies within sustainable agriculture. I wouldn't say there's anything completely dedicated to sustainable agriculture. Now, the USDA does run the organic program. I don't know if I'd call that policy or oversight. Maybe there's a difference, I guess. But I know that the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Program, which is governed through the USDA and housed under the Farm Bill, there was provisions in there. Again, not specific for sustainable agriculture, but small-scale agriculture, socially disadvantaged, which they need to change that term, but that incorporates women farmers, low-income, minority, essentially anybody other than the typical farmer that you see. It incorporates everybody else. And so there were provisions in there for that. Congressman Fortenberry did champion a local foods bill several years ago that did get passed that allowed for some of the programs like the Farmers Market Promotion Program and the Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food program that the USDA also administered. So there's starting to see trickles of that. One of the biggest programs that the USDA has is SARE, Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. Again, that's the specific focus on sustainable agriculture. Again, I wouldn't call it a policy so much as just an entity of agriculture that's housed at the USDA.
I have a question from WebEx. How can local food be accessible and affordable for all?
That's a great question, and I don't think it's an easy answer. The Gray Plume is a great restaurant, but not everybody can afford it, and that's just a fact. But you wouldn't expect to go to the Gray Plume if you were living in Silver Creek, Nebraska, like a Gray Plume type place in Silver Creek. And so understanding that there's differences between rural and urban and how food is perceived and how food is sold and bought and bartered for, it's going to vary from place to place, city to city, rural to urban. Finding a price point that where your customer continues to come back and it's affordable to them and accessible to them. It'll vary from farmer to farmer. There's some farmers that only cater to higher dollar audiences, if you will, and there's other farmers that they're living and subsisting off of the farm, but they also want to be a part of their community. And so, if you're looking at the community that my wife and I farm in, it's not Omaha and Lincoln. It's places in between. So our prices would be different to accommodate that because we really want to be a player in that community.
Some other questions coming in. When you spoke about common good farms, one of the questions is, what is biodynamic?
That's a great question, and that's one that I'm really, okay, so what is biodynamic? The first time I heard that, I was really intrigued by that. My wife and I don't know if we have any aspirations to be certified organic. I would like to be certified biodynamic. I'm not the expert to speak about it, but in my view, it is similar to holistic management, and it's looking at the entire picture. So we're putting up a dairy barn, and you can't see it in any of these pictures, but so we had to take out 2 pine trees to accommodate that barn, and the impact that that's going to have in the windbreak on pasture land further south of where that is. We thought about that and how can we help to mitigate it, I guess. because we do get strong north winds. I mean, so it's really taking into account all of that. I mentioned Bob Steffen, who helped found the organization. He was crucial in creating the Biodynamic Farming and Gardening Association, which is a national organization. And so we have strong roots to that, but I believe there's only 2 farms in the state that do certified biodynamic. Most of the time I know websites off the top of my head, but I don't know theirs off the top of my head. But you can go to Common Good Farm. They're on the Facebook, and they have a website, and I'm sure they have more information.
Another question, what would be the easiest way or the first step to growing at home?
Just trying it, just winging it. I think, that's, okay, I'm not repeating the questions. So what would be the first step to growing it at home? Again, I say just go for it. I'm not a fruit and vegetable grower, but I love the tomatoes that I grow and the peppers that I grow, and I try to grow some hops. And so I don't know anything about that. Growing up, I didn't do much of the gardening, mostly because I really don't like pulling weeds. And so, but I learned just by doing, and, I made mistakes along the way. I would just, so say, I have an uncle who lives in La Vista in a balcony in a high-rise. That's my example I used. And he grew tomatoes. And he doesn't know anything about farming, even though he grew up in Nebraska, rural Nebraska. And he just started doing it. And he called me 2 weeks later and said, "You have to water this, huh?" And I'm not kidding, he didn't know that. And so I would say go online. The biggest step is just to take that leap of faith and try it. Do something simple like herbs, tomatoes. You can do any of those on a balcony, in a raised bed sort of setup. I mean, you could grow something in this cup if you wanted, other than coffee.
Your Omaha-related question. Lawrence Butler from Daddy's Neighborhood Fresh Market. They're currently doing a barn raiser,
Right. Yep.
that you've done, and opening a grass-fed ice cream shop. Do you have any suggestions?
I've been to their place, and they're doing a lot of great things. I just say continue to do it. The great thing about the barn raiser is you're really, again, laying that foundation for the community that's going to support that entrepreneurial idea, and that's what they're going to get at Daddy's. I know location's an issue for them. I've driven past, like the first time I was driving past it, and where is this place? But it's a great little shop. I like visiting it. Just really being dedicated to the sourcing, going out to the farms. A lot of the restaurants that we brought up, the chefs go out to the farms, and vice versa. The farmers go to the chefs, and they really build that relationship. What does it look like for Lawrence to go out to Branched Oak Farm and immerse himself in milking a cow, and vice versa? Doug and Krista go to Daddy's and really see the different sides of how that chain works. I'd say that's the biggest way. Experience it a little bit, build that community.
A couple more questions. This one's a little long. I am worried about nitrogen in the water going down the waterways to the Gulf and creating a dead zone. How can Nebraska make its large-scale agriculture better for all communities, not just large-scale farmers?
I don't know how to repeat that one. Nitrogen, would that be this? That's a tough question to answer. I know there are some starting to be some sites again in the USDA and the Nebraska Department of Agriculture, programs like Drift Watch, where similar to like a no spray zone. This is a sustainable, holistic orchard, so to speak. There's those programs. I think the biggest way is to establish a relationship with your neighbor, whether they're a conventional farmer or not. One of my favorite TV shows is Red Green. Has anybody ever seen this show on PBS? So at the end, it's a Canadian humor show. It's really weird, but it's funny and clean, kind of. My kid watches. Anyway, but at the end, he talks about we're all in this together, and it really is true. We are all in this together. And so I would say that's the biggest. I keep emphasizing relationships and communities, and that really is the way to do this, I think. And so talk to your neighbor. We've talked to our neighbor, and he knows what we're trying to do, and he might think we're a little crazy, but hey, we're all in this together. So
Maybe I can hear the question. Can you please speak to the ecological, biological diversity that sustainable farming supports and the benefits that diversity brings to the food production process?
Right, that's a loaded question. I think you can go out to any number of farms that have been utilizing sustainable and organic principles and see firsthand. I think that would be the best way, whether it's the pollinators, native pollinators that are there that otherwise in a conventional system might not be. The topsoil, how much topsoil is black and organic and how much has been built over time using rotational grazing and pasture management techniques. Minimal tillage, minimal disturbance of the soil, mimicking nature, putting in shelter belts, shade structures for your cattle, having your cattle out on the grass, having your chickens follow your cattle so they break up the manure, eat the bad flies and let the dung beetles build that topsoil. I think that's probably the best way to see how that interacts. And I mean, I could go on and on about that. That's really a loaded question, but I think that's the best way to do that is to just go experience a farm, work on a farm for a day. It'll be a lot of hard work, but it'll be a lot of fun.
Thank you. If anybody has any last questions, please get them in. We have about one or two more right now, so if you have any questions, now's the time to send them in. Another one, do you ever feel the pressures of farming in a way that may be more lucrative?
Do I ever feel the pressures of farming that might be more lucrative?
Maybe abandoning sustainable practices or...
Certainly not. No. And I mentioned it early on in the talks with my grandfather, which was really before my, this idea. I didn't even know what the heck sustainability meant at that time. I probably didn't until I went to Cornell. It's really it's a mindset. It's the lens of seeing things. And so I mentioned the economic viability. Our farm is not, the derivative of happiness for us isn't money. It's quality of life. We can raise our kids on the farm. I have no problem with my kid going up to our cows, going out into the pasture. I mean, it's really that's the lens we see things through. And it's not easy. And it's still farming, getting up at 4:30 and milking cows. I actually enjoy that myself, but, a lot of people wouldn't. My two boys, 3-year-old and 1-year-old, also like to come out at 4:30, so that makes that interesting. Daddy daycare starts early, but it's really a way of seeing things. And so, no, I don't. If you're chasing money, you're never going to be happy. So.
Thank you. Going back to money, will you talk about slow money, specifically the connection between slow money and financing for sustainable ag?
I don't know a whole lot about slow money. I know a little bit, probably enough to hopefully make sense. So slow money, it's very similar to slow food where you're pausing to slow down and appreciate the food with slow food, but with money, you're really pausing and slowing down to appreciate these ideas and entrepreneurial spirits of getting behind these projects by investing in them with your money and your time and really being a part of that process. I know that Slow Money is having a regional gathering in Kansas City in November, and so that might be a good place for more people to learn about that. And I know that there's a Slow Money investment group in the Omaha area as well.
Thank you. Diversification of farmstead is described as better insulating farming operations from the impacts of climate change. Is there any indication that mid and larger operations might also benefit from the strategy?
I think across the board and across society, we definitely need to be accounting for climate change. I'm not going to get into the politics of that, but yeah, definitely the medium and larger farms, I think, that aren't already utilizing sustainable and organic principles, it would be very beneficial for them, even if they're only looking at the bottom line, to incorporate sustainable and organic principles. Their farm's going to become a more diverse farm and definitely begin that journey of sustainability.
Wonderful. So we have a comment from Justin Simmons on Twitter. I'm not sure where Justin Simmons is from, so His question is there any local community gardening or guerrilla gardening that you know of?
Where?
Not sure. So
Well, I would say, yeah, community gardening or guerrilla gardening. We've tried to get some guerrilla gardening ideas going in Nebraska, and also a kind of a rogue concept, guerrilla grazing. So you have this CRP land, or you have this state land that's not doing anything, and maybe it's hunting, or I don't know, let's graze it in the off season, provide a better habitat, things like that. So we have not been successful in either of those. But community gardening in Omaha, check out City Sprouts or the Big Garden. In Lincoln, check out Community Crops. I know that there's a group in Washington County called the Alternative Growers Group, and they do a lot of community gardening around Blair and Fort Calhoun. I would wager most smaller communities have some sort of community gardening. Even our church in Fresco, we have a raised bed garden that, produce is open to whomever wants it. We're growing it for the community. So.
Okay, we have one more question, but in the meantime, can you maybe describe guerrilla gardening a little more?
Yeah, I would say I'm sure it's defined somewhere, everything's defined, but it's really just, so you have this plot of land somewhere, and with gardening it's more likely in a bigger city that's not doing anything. It's just, frankly, it's an eyesore, and a group just comes in and they plant a garden, whether it's just a bed of flowers or actually food that you can eat, or maybe even edible flowers, I don't know. The legality of it's probably questionable. Definitely looks better. Some good case studies would be Detroit or Portland. I know that they have both pretty vibrant guerrilla groups.
Okay.
That's what they call themselves.
And the last question has to be, what work in a farm can or not looking for?
So what can working on a farm do to help young people that aren't looking to get into farming? Get your hands dirty. I think that's the biggest thing. It teaches a work ethic that actually a lot of employers, even outside of agriculture, look for. From one that grows up on a farm, they learn, and it goes throughout their life, how to work hard and be a part of that larger culture of agriculture. And so I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but it really, you got to milk the cows. 10 years old, I tell people this story still. I didn't wake up at 4:30 to milk cows with my grandfather, and he dumped a bucket of water on me in my bed. So to this day, I don't use an alarm clock. And so that's the way it was. And I'm not going to do that to my kid, by the way, but you learn, it's got to be done. I had to milk cows on Christmas morning. I thought it sucked. I wanted to open presents, but the cows got to be milked. So I think the biggest thing is hard work and responsibility.
I think that's the last of our questions. So thank you very much, William. We do appreciate your informative presentation. I'm just going to go ahead and let everyone know that next month, Daniel Lossie and Lily Livingston will be presenting live from Metropolitan Community College, discussing biomimicry and biophilia on Thursday, May 7th. And in June, we will end the 2014-2015 speaker series with a presentation hosted by the Joslin Institute for Sustainable Communities. So please be sure to tune into both of those. And again, if you have any questions, here's William's information, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any follow-up questions that perhaps you didn't get to today. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.